Ready? So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Administration and Projects Committee for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And we're happy to have you here. We'll begin with public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to address an issue not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Then the next item is the approval of the minutes. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. With regards to the consent calendar, I have a request from staff to remove item 9, which is related to the executive assistant position. Is there a motion to approve the remaining items, or would anyone like to pull anything else?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Taylor, second by Commissioner Pierce. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Then with regard to the remaining items, we've had a request that we take item 13 first, just because of the schedule of some of the participants in the room. So I will turn this over to Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Susan Miller, Director of Projects. So these next two items relate to the SR4 Balfour Interchange Project, and I'll handle the first item, and Ivan will be doing the second item. Staff is working very hard with the consultant team to finalize the plan specifications and estimate package with Caltrans and obtain the encroachment permit to allow the project to proceed to construction. We feel we are very close to reaching this point, and you will see when Ivan presents the next item that we want to be ready to advertise as soon as our documents are finalized. Additional work has arisen which affect the scope of the project and have created extra work on the part of the consultant team, Quincy Engineering. A substantial portion of the extra work has to do with unforeseen scope and services related to the relocation of utilities, the Kinder Morgan pump plant and pipeline relocation, and active participation by the consultant team during the ongoing PG&E relocation work, which is occurring out there right now. Additionally, because of the timeline for the design was drawn out because of the complexity of the relocation for these utilities, some updates to Caltrans design requirements and policies change, such as stormwater requirements, ramp metering requirements, electrical specification, and structure updates. Some good news to report is that full funding is now committed to the project. The draft 2016 Measure J strategic plan, which you'll hear about later this morning, reprograms additional funding from the East County Corridor Reserve to Balfour, and that was supported by Transplan. And the East Contra Costa Fee and Financing Authority has adopted additional funds for the project in their 2015 strategic plan. And in fact, we will be bringing the formal amendment to the ECRFA agreement to the board in March to memorialize that. To conclude, staff seeks authorization for the chair to execute amendment number 4 to agreement number 354 with Quincy Engineering in the amount of $248,000 for a new total agreement value of $4,938,891 and to extend the agreement termination date to June 30th, 2016. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. And additionally, Brent Lemon, who's the project manager with Quincy, and Patrick Flynn are also in the audience, and they can assist with any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you. Are there questions? Okay, I see no questions. Is there any public comment on this item? Mr. Ramirez, did you have a comment to add? Okay, that's fine. All right. Well, if there are no questions and there are no public comments, would anyone like to make a motion?
Are you kidding? This is huge for us. And there was I just wanted to know through Transplan, there was no opposition, just nothing but good comments. The comments were made. When do we get it going? And when are we going to cut a ribbon? And then Africa, there was no issues either. So I understand it was all you, Ivan. It was all you.
That's the next item.
So,
That's the next item.
so anyway, I do make a motion.
Commissioner Pierce to approve item 13.1. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
which brings us to item 13.2. Mr. Ramirez.
Yes, good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Ivan Ramirez, Construction Manager for the Authority. And I want to begin by saying that I will never take full credit here. It's always a team that works on issues, but thank you so much. Like Projects Director Susan Miller stated, the plans and specifications and estimate are very close to being done for the Balfour project. And in anticipation of that, we want to ask the authority two things. The first one, or two main things. The first one is, back in July of last year, the board approved Resolution 1545P, which you designated the executive director as the person that could approve plans and specifications once they were ready. And we need that approval for design immunity for Section Code 830.6. And the reason is because we want to take advantage of the current bidding environment, which is very favorable. We get calls all the time about this project, so we expect a lot of bidders. That will lower the price, hopefully, of the project. And also, we also want to take advantage of the construction season next year. We won't have the full season, but if we begin construction in July, which we are currently scheduling to do, then we will have time to do a lot of work before the rain season begins. So if the board designates the executive director as the person to approve the plans, then we'll also ask permission for him to advertise the project, approve any changes that might occur, including addenda, during the bidding process, and also to publicly open all bids. Currently, we expect to begin construction in July of 2016. We hope to have the project completed by early 2019. And as Susan noted, the project's fully funded, and the construction budget is approximately $46.5 million. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? And I'll bring it back to the committee, and I wonder if there's a member from East County who might want to make a motion.
Definitely. I would like to be present, or maybe someone from Brent would be present when we do the open the bids. Would that be acceptable? Because, pardon me?
You want to be there.
Oh, that's even better. But anyway, I make a motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Arnerich. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Great. Thank you. They're all lining up. They're all lining up. Yeah. Yeah. Picking over the carcass. All right, which brings us to our legislation update. Ms. Willis.
Good morning, Commissioners. I want to give you a brief update on some things happening at the federal level, and then our state advocate, Mark Watts, will give you the scoop on what's happening in Sacramento. On the dais in front of you, you have a handout, which is a letter to the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee signed by all the executive directors of the self-help counties, and this relates to an issue with the FAA rulemaking related to aviation fuel tax and how that affects local sales taxes. It's something we talked about at this committee in December, and we promised you we'd keep our eye on, and we are continuing to lead this effort. And what's happening is the FAA created a rule where their interpretation is that they can reach in and essentially get their hands on local voter-approved sales tax dollars to use for their own purposes. And because the FAA is up for reauthorization this year, we're leading a coalition in California, and I'm expecting this is going to expand out much beyond just the state of California shortly to get that rule reversed as part of their reauthorization process, or at least exempt local voter-approved sales tax measures. So this letter was recently sent. We wanted to make sure that you guys had a copy of that to know that that's an issue we're still working on. Also in your packet from our federal advocate, Keystone Public Affairs, is a summary of the FAST Act. now that it's been passed, the focus is really on implementation, and we're keeping our eye on US DOT because they're expected to release a whole host of notices of available funding and grant applications shortly, and we're trying to keep our eye on where we can get our hands on the most funding, especially in the research and technology areas and some of the project delivery and potentially ferry funding. So we're paying close attention to that. I know that we're working on planning a trip to DC to go advocate for some of those items. So we'll keep you informed as that moves along. And also something of note, I don't have it written up yet, and I'll be sure I include it next month, is that FHWA is looking at reallocating some earmarks back to the states. So as part of the appropriations bill in December, they're looking at all earmarks that are more than 10 years old and giving those dollars back to the states to kind of get them off the books. So that's something we'll be watching as well in the future. So that's my very brief federal update, and I'm happy to answer
Are
any
there
questions on
regarding the federal update?
it. Okay, well then.
Seeing none, then Mr. Watts, welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Is it nice being here rather than Sacramento?
It is.
Right.
It's a relief to be out of that town sometimes, which is why I don't live in that town. I just live a little outside of it. So this session has started. It's a little slower than in my experience compared to other years in terms of the number of bills being introduced, but I expect that to pick up by the deadline at the end of this month. Among those bills are two that the staff would like to highlight and seek your direction on. The first is AB 1592. It's Assemblymember Bonilla's measure that was introduced to address autonomous vehicles and allow the autonomous vehicles to, in fact, a special type of autonomous vehicle without a driver. But it would authorize such an autonomous vehicle to be operated in a business park that's selected by this body, as well as at Gomentum Station. Why it's needed is that there will be incidental crossings of public roads, and the state of current law would not allow a driverless vehicle to do that. So this bill goes a long way to helping clear the way for that kind of a project in those two kind of situations. So that's what the measure does. The author is currently working to build support, particularly among cities and the county here. We are expected to assist them as they move forward, and as a consequence, the staff is recommending that this committee recommend to the board support position on the measure.
So I noticed in your report that it talks about a potential hearing on February 14th.
No, that would be the earliest date it could have been eligible
Okay.
to be heard. Has been referred to the Assembly Transportation Committee, but no date has been set yet.
Okay.
So I would expect it actually to be more likely late February, early March as
Okay.
the first eligible date, but that was just kind of an early warning to give everybody a target date.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. The other measures, another bill by Assemblymember Bonilla. This deals with the sales tax for general transportation, or for transportation purposes. The measure that was adopted a few years ago in concert with Alameda County. The bill replaces the county as the imposer of the tax with your body. And as a consequence, I know there have been briefed by staff, there are conversations between the county administration and your management about whether that's the final form of the bill that should go forward or not. I might leave it to Randy or Ross to speak to the exact nature of the conversations, if that's necessary at this point in time. But because it deals with an issue that's of great importance here in the county, I think the author is expecting support from this body.
All right. Are there questions or any comments at this point? Ross?
Yes. So I drafted the bill. It's very simple. It just currently says County of Alameda and the County of Contra Costa. Struck out County of Contra Costa, put in CCTA. So what that did is eliminate any option for the county to seek a similar type of a bill, still related to transportation programs. Well, I don't know. So this was brought to my attention by John Cunningham last week, and I don't know, John, if you could have anything you could add to the discussion. I believe there's going to be potentially some discussion at a committee meeting on Monday.
Welcome. And if you can
Hello?
just fill out a speaker slip when you're done.
Sure,
for our
I'll get
records
right on
here.
that, yeah. Good morning, Chair Tatz and members of the committee. I'm John Cunningham. I'm a transportation planner with Contra Costa County. The board has not taken a position or even discussed the legislation at this point, as Ross and Mark described. We are having a meeting on Monday to discuss it. The discussions that staff has had have to contemplate if there's a way to have the legislation still identify CCTA as the authorizing body for the sales tax measure, but still leave the county in the statute and isolate that it will still be one single entity that can move the TEP forward. So again, without the board discussing or taking position, that's really all I have on this.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Chair, and so
Yes.
if one option we haven't really explored a lot. It could be include language, I would say, the county or CCTA. That way, I think one of the concerns you'd want to think about is the existing statute allows a certain amount of tax, period, a half a cent countywide. If we leave it at a half a cent countywide, I don't know if that would result in any reaction from the taxpayers. Certainly if we had CCTA and the county both with the ability, I would think that there would be some reaction. So I don't know if we want to bring this back after the counties discuss it more, or if we want to provide staff with direction that an either or may be acceptable, but open to whatever way you want to direct us.
All right. Is there any other public comment? All right. So commissioner comments?
I think that wouldn't the either or cover either or?
Either or would essentially, the change there would be to say the statute currently says only the county, then it would be county or CCTA, but the net result is there could be no more than half a cent countywide tax. If the statute says CCTA and the county each have the ability, the net result is a penny tax, or it could be a penny tax. So I think we could anticipate some reaction from Taxpayers Association on that one.
Okay. Commissioner Arnerich?
And, I think, Ross, thanks for taking the lead on this. The bottom line is, and I know John knows this, when the legislation was originally written, it was the intention that it was this agency, and because we have Contra Costa in our title, but we're standalone, in a way it's an oversight. So I hope we don't, get into a fight over what the intention was, because everybody knew. We all supported it for that reason. Is it an opportunity to try to add something else? Yeah, but we also have to keep our eye on focus. This is for what our voters and our constituencies expect us to do. And in terms of how we rallied the support originally to do this, it was around that this agency would do this. It's a technical oversight. So I think we ought to really be doing it as a technical oversight, and this is a clarification. If we start to expand it, it's going to stop. And I think it just won't. It will not go to where it's going to be a half cent for each of the agencies. And if the county wants help on that, then we ought to agree to help them do that. But it's a standalone piece of legislation, because otherwise it'd be misleading what everybody thought this was. And I think we need to be a little altruistic and take the high road in saying what was the purpose, the intention. And publicly, the record is clear. There never was a secondary discussion. So I think if we take that, it's not them against us. It's what was the intention. Let's make sure we stay on board. And should there be a need to help the county in a way should they decide to do something, that as an agency, we ought to look to help them do that. And I see no reason not to. So.
Other comments? All right. Okay, so there's motion to support. Is that motion include the prior bill regarding the autonomous vehicles? Okay. So the motion to support, and I know there may be more, but let's just deal with those. So is the motion to support both bills, recognizing there's some further discussions to be held? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Now, other items.
I have an additional bill to bring to your attention, and I believe staff would, and I would concur that this would be suitable to support. The measure is AB 1746 by Assemblymember Stone from the Peninsula Monterey area. Basically, it amends a bill that he did previously for Monterey Salinas Transit that authorizes, under certain conditions that involve the Highway Patrol and Caltrans, to the transit agencies in those two counties to operate bus on shoulder on highways and freeways. It's not an unfettered authority, but it recognizes that there are certain key corridors where operating bus on shoulder operations will help express services and avoid some dangerous backup queues for bus service. And the requirements in the bill say that the entity so authorized has to work with Caltrans and the CHP, and they have to consider safety, the infrastructure that's in place, and ensure, in fact, it requires that any maintenance of the shoulders is on the backs of the transit agency. So I think it's a good operational improvement. I understand it's consistent with reports developed under your authority here for that kind of an operation. And in this case, it includes now the county connection as the entity that would have that authority should this bill pass. It also includes several other entities throughout the state, so it's a growing list of folks interested in this kind of express service queue jumper for bus operations on freeways.
Are there any comments? I would just note that this whole idea of bus on shoulder is something that came out of the 680 transit study that we've just done.
And it's being considered on the Highway 4 Integrated Corridor Mobility Project, so at least 2 examples in our county.
Okay, and from your perspective, does the bill cover what it needs to implement our service?
It just recently got
Okay.
introduced.
All right, so we're in the
and
early
County
stages.
Connection has asked
Okay.
us to support it.
All right, Commissioner Pierce.
I would suggest we support in concept because we actually talked about it when we talked about the Highway 24 study years ago as a possibility of getting through traffic on the way to the Caldecott Tunnel. You have to have a way to get back in, but nonetheless, it was one of those ways of getting through that backup. So I think the concept is a good one.
Okay, so I assume that was a motion to support the bill in concept. Is there a second? Second. Okay. Take your choice. Commissioner Butter, Commissioner Arnrich. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Other items?
Just 2 quick things to close out on. First, as you know, there's a focus in Sacramento on transportation funding. There are 3 major efforts underway. Senator Bell is about to amend his bill. Assemblymember Frazier has his bill in print, AB 1591, and the governor has a bill ready for the budget process or any other mechanism that will allow him to move forward. And included in at least the governor's bill and Senator Bell's amendments that are coming up is broadening authority for innovative procurements like P3, CMGC of some limited amount. And we knew that the professional engineers in California government had not looked favorably when the governor came out with his proposal last summer and repeated it this year. So they're formalizing their opposition. What's surprising to me is that they're not affiliated with the AFL-CIO. They are, I kind of consider them a guild, but Nevertheless, they have a lot of power in Sacramento. What they've been able to do, however, notwithstanding the fact that they're not affiliated, is reach out and bring in some other organizations, AFSCME and others, to join them in this battle. And they're formally fighting it. So it's a disappointing development, but not unexpected. I think the surprise was the little bit broader reach that they're bringing to the table this time. I don't think the governor's going to blink. It'll be up to the legislature to work through this as they work through the funding bill. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. That's yet another anchor being put around the transportation finance discussion in Sacramento. And lastly, I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just there is a copy on the dais in front of you of that letter.
And is there an update? I think we're going to hear it later when we talk about the STIF of what's going on so far with state transportation funding.
I can address it if you'd like, but if staff is prepared to do it later,
I think we have a whole item just on
Okay.
that
All right.
Hisham's going to talk about.
All right. Nothing else, and thank you very much. We'll see you in March. That brings us to item 12, which is the draft 2016 Measure J strategic plan. Mr. Galimi.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. Back in May, you provided us with direction on key policy issues to guide the development of the 2016 strategic plan. At that time, you adopted a new sales tax revenue projection. That's about $10 million more than what we had in the last plan. You reiterated your commitment to issue bonds to advance projects, and you instructed us to hold the additional programming capacity in construction reserves to be programmed through plan amendments to specific projects for unforeseen cost increases. We were supposed to present you with the draft back in December, but we decided to delay it a couple of months to ensure that it reflects the bond sales we did in December, and also to give the RTPCs some breathing room given everything else they had to work on between the RTP and the TP and other things. The 2016 strategic plan commits Measure J funds to projects through fiscal year 21. It also reflects revenues and expenditures through June 2015. Approximately 85% of our Measure J funds to capital project has been programmed through fiscal year 21, or about $724 million. This is due to your policy to issue bonds to advance projects. The plan anticipates issuance of one last bond of about $95 million in fiscal year 2018. We will, of course, reevaluate the size and timing in future updates of that final bond and future updates of the plan. The plan fully funds Balfour Road Interchange, which had about $17 million in funding shortfall just a few months ago. $8 million came from ECRFA, thanks Mayor Bob, and $9 million came from the East County Corridor Reserve in the Measure J strategic plan. This allows us to advertise the Balfour Road project for construction. We also got input from the 4 RTPCs on the plan on which projects to put within the strategic plan window, and all of that input has been incorporated in the plan. Other highlights in the plan are included in your packet on page 12-2 and 12-3. I will not repeat them here. We're asking today for your comments, if you have any, to incorporate in the final version. We will come back to you for final approval in March. Finally, I just want to thank our finance and projects team for helping me put this plan together.
Very good. Thank you. Are there comments? I think silence implies support.
The only other thing I wanted to add to our projects is a printing machine. A fun printing machine. This is just really frustrating. We're getting a lot of projects done that we want to do, but because of the state cutbacks and everything else, it's really frustrating.
All right. So,
Excuse me.
Commissioner Taylor.
But I would like to say this. you did a heck of a job.
Thank you.
A lot of work. Obviously you've been out to our side of the country, so gosh knows wherever else you've been. But you're to be commended because that's quite an undertaking.
Thank you.
And so I think staff did a great job, Randy, and it needs to be acknowledged.
I echo that sentiment, as do we all. All right, so maybe the recommendation from us is to forward this to the authority. Okay, there's a motion and a second by Commissioner Taylor. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. So we've dealt with items 13 regarding Balfour, so that brings us to the State Transportation Improvement Program update.
I'll
Welcome back.
handle this one, yes. And unfortunately, the news is not good.
I was going to say, there's less good news.
I've been here for 15 years, and this is probably the worst news we had related to the STIP. In January, as you know, the CTC adopted a negative STIP estimate of minus $754 million. This compares to about $46 million that they adopted back in August of 2015. And if you want to look back in the last 2014 STIP, the estimate was $1.26 billion. So this tells you how bad it is. The reason is that's being quoted, it's the declining gas prices, which is the main fund source for the STIP. And the other reason is the lack of fix from the legislature. I think Mark mentioned the three bills that are on the table, the James Frazier bill and the governor budget. They all had fixes to varying degrees to the STIP, but at this point, there doesn't seem to be consensus on any one of them. So the CTC is hoping this would put pressure on the legislature to react positively to some of these bills. And, because it's a negative fund estimate, we are technically supposed to be deleting project from the STIP. When I say deleting, if we delete anything from this STIP cycle, we're basically reprogramming it to the next STIP cycle, 2018 STIP. So if you're programmed in the last year of the STIP, fiscal year 21, the next time you will get your funding, the earliest will be fiscal year 22 if you get programmed in the 2018 STIP, assuming there will be money and there will be a fix at that time. If we get asked to delete projects, we looked at our list of projects and found two that can be reprogrammed to the next step with the least harm. They are, unfortunately, the 684 Phase 3 construction phase. We have $9.6 million programmed for that project. And the other project is the BART station modernization project, which has about $13 million programmed in the last year in the STIP. I'm going to describe both projects a little bit. The 684 construction phase is currently not fully funded. As you may recall, we have about $35+ million shortfall to do the project as it is scoped now. Unless we phase it further, do a portion of it, we really couldn't anyway move with this project without figuring out the funding shortfall. And the silver lining in this, if we delete it, we will have an opportunity to program more STIP funding to it in future STIP cycles. As you may know, the current CTC rules basically do not allow you to add any STIP funds to a project that is already programmed in the STIP, to a project phase that's already programmed in the STIP. Once we submit an application to ask for funding, basically you're saying to the CTC that phase is fully funded. And that was the case until we found out we had to replace the Grayson Bridge on 684. So it's no longer the case. So even if we wanted to solve the funding shortfall by adding STIP funds, unless we delete it, we couldn't do that. Now we have an opportunity to do it if we decide to cover that shortfall ourselves. On the BART station modernization project, it is currently programmed in the last year in the STIP. By deleting the project, we talked to BART. We're basically delaying the project by 1 year because it's already in the last year in the STIP, and we will be recommitting funding from the next STIP cycle to it in fiscal year 22. Just the story behind this $13 million, it was originally programmed for EBART. However, since the STIP money was not available in time for EBART, BART did a fund exchange where basically they gave us $13 million in other funds they had and programmed this $13 million in STIP to the BART station modernization project. Those stations are not necessarily in Contra Costa. They're all over San Francisco, Alameda, and maybe Contra Costa. They have not really identified the stations yet. We are not asking you for action today. We're still meeting with MTC and the other CMAs to figure out what is the best plan to deal with this, but we want to be prepared in case they come and ask us to delete project, that you're okay with us proposing these two projects. We don't really think the CTC should, on their own, pick which projects to delete from our county share. I mean, that would be a real problem for us if they delete projects. For example, we have the 680 HOV gap closure and the express lanes. We worked hard to fully fund it. We don't want them to touch that one, for example. So we just want to be prepared and equipped when we go and talk to MTC and the other CMAs. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions or comments? Commissioner Taylor.
Question. As we proceed down this road, because I don't know when this has ever been done, this type of cut. It doesn't appear, if we listen to everybody, who's who, this could be a projection it could go for the next couple of years. In other words, they're predicting oil and et cetera will never, I mean, it'll be a long time. So projections are only a year out, or how does that work? Do they go out, if all of a sudden, would it go out to 2 years, 3 years? Because this could hurt us a long time. Am I
Well, it's a
on
good
the
question.
right road? Okay.
And a couple of things, and I actually did chat with Mark about one thing when I was walking out. So it's by law, CTC has to project revenues over the next 5 years. So I don't know the details, but they've made some kind of assumption about the price of gas over the next 5 years. And as you say, it's not expected to rebound to where it was historically. So, the funding for the STIP, to go back to the gas tax swap, it's part out of an excise tax, which is a certain amount of cents per gallon, and then part out of what used to be a sales tax, which is a percent of value. So price of gas goes down, the revenue goes down. It's very simple. It was intended to be a revenue neutral bill, and it's one of these unintended consequences. So as Hisham says, there's talk about fixing that as part of some of the transportation funding packages, and then potentially even indexing some of the funds. Currently, they're not indexed either. The excise side is not indexed. That's been fixed for years and years. And then all this happens through the Board of Equalization. So Mark was saying there is some pressure on Board of Equalization to take a different approach before they take this action. There's some debate on whether they could do that administratively or if there'd have to be legislation. But there's going to be a lot of pressure to try to avoid this. But I wouldn't hold out a lot of hope. So I think part of Hisham's recommendation is, both in Sacramento and as well as what some of the discussions at MTC, we really need to continue to watch this. And I think he's asking for direction of if staff is forced to nominate some projects. We've got a couple, but we'd prefer to try to work with the folks to keep pressure on before we voluntarily delete projects.
Commissioner Heinrich, then Commissioner Pierce.
What's and maybe I wasn't listening carefully, what is the legal implication if we remove a project in order to say, okay, we remove it, can we place it back on, or is there a time limit, or it has to be a different description, or how does that work?
So if you delete a project, you're basically technically out of a phase of the project, not necessarily the entire project, you're technically out of the step, and you basically, it's up to each county, each CMA to pick which projects to include in the next step cycle. So in the 2018 step cycle, we will do a call for project, and it's you basically you can decide, okay, anything that got deleted, this comes off the top. They don't have to recompete again in the next step cycle. And if there is any money left, you can add to these projects or add new projects.
Okay, so there is a good process set in place, and it does give you priority then for the next round. So, okay, thanks.
It pains me to say so, but I think it might be an opportunity to finally get the fix done for Highway 4, seeing as the state doesn't seem to want to pay for it out of the funds that ought to pay for it. The Highway 4 680 interchange. If we defund it now, then we can come back and add in the shortfall when we reapply. So much as it hurts, I would suggest that's probably the more strategic way to go. I do have a question, and it may be just that I've been in this building far too much lately, but I'm losing track. On the very bottom of the table on 14-4, there's a line that says new project to be proposed by MTC. I'm drawing a total blank. Am I supposed to know what this is?
This is the 101 US 101 HOV project in Sonoma. MTC approved.
That's right. Okay, it was the swap.
It was there.
It was the proposed swap. Okay,
Well,
gotcha.
the funds originally came from Caldecott.
Right.
So MTC backfilled Caldecott, and
Right.
they control the STIP dollars. So.
They moved things around. Okay, I knew it was something, and I just was drawing a blank because I was focused on Contra Costa. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, are there other, yes. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. Deidre Heitman with BART. I want to say that it also pains us to move out the station modernization project for BART, but I want to assure you that as long as I'm breathing, it will not affect our Contra Costa station modernization projects that we have going forward, specifically El Cerrito, and we're in design with one on Concord. So we appreciate the fact that you did the swap years ago on the eBART. I think we can live with moving out the station modernization funds, and I want to thank Hisham for his leadership with MTC on this issue. Our number one project right now is that Walnut Creek TOD project. The developer is ready to break ground this calendar year, so it's very important to keep that moving forward. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
So I think you've gotten the sense of preference. I think there's concurrence that if we have to delete projects, we'd rather decide which ones to delete rather than having CTC tell us which ones to delete. And sorry a task as it is, sounds like you've come up with the best candidates. So, all right. With that, are there any commissioner and staff comments? Yes.
So I wanted to remind you that on February 18th, Honda's going to have an open house at Momentum Station, and so we'll send out invitations. Lindsay has done a very good job of coordinating, making sure that we don't have any quorum issues. I think the morning is media and then access, and then in the afternoon it's elected officials. We've invited everybody from Secretary Fox down to Secretary Kelly here in California to some of you. And so and I sent an email note out, if any of you aren't on the first wave of people that are going to go in and you want to see it, which like Mayor Taylor wants to go check it out, we'll schedule a separate time. Jack Hall, who's wearing the Momentum tie today, has done a great job. We've moved the entrance from entering in through the Army property into the Navy to directly into the Navy property. So some of the issues of not being able to get non-U.S. citizens through has been mitigated now. So it's better access. Plus our potential partners are going in there as well, and it's not getting hung up. So I think we're ready for prime time. So, you want to add anything, Lindsay? Okay, great.
Any other comments? Sorry, Commissioner Taylor.
You'll
You want to talk about
Lindsay, you'll take care of me, correct?
Yes, we're
So I'll know
still,
where to go. I'll have my passport and everything.
yes, we'll be arranging a few trips in the future. So we'll make sure it works with your schedule.
And Ross?
So I just want to highlight some information Randy's already sent out to you, but publicly to thank Ivan and Chris Cole back in the room there. You should have seen that BART was provided access to the median out on the Hillcrest project a couple of days in advance of what we had promised, and that was no easy task in a year where we're finally getting some rain. So it was one of those ones where everybody's telling Ivan, we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it, and he kept saying, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, and they found a solution. The executive committee approved funding change order to stabilize some dirt out there. That's saving us and BART tremendous amount of money in the future. So tenacity got it done on that one.
All right, great. Thank you. Glad it happened. Congratulations and thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Chair.
And with that, we are adjourned to our meeting on March 3rd. Thank you.